So, I want you to imagine for a second that you're a paleontologist.
Oh, nice. Out in the field getting your hands dirty.
Right, exactly. You're out in the field, the sun is just beating down on you, and you're standing at the base of this massive, towering cliff face.
I can picture it.
And the rock is exposed, right? You can see these very distinct horizontal bands of color stacked on top of each other, totally undisturbed by, the modern landscape.
Like a giant layer cake of geology.
Yes, a giant rocky layer cake. And you take out your tools and you start carefully chiseling away at the very lowest, bottommost layer of rock. And you find fossils.
Okay, the hunt begins.
But they're really simple. You're finding ancient marine organisms, maybe some primitive sponges or, bivalves, clams. But there's nothing with legs. There's nothing with a complex skeletal structure.
Right, because you are looking at the very early fundamental architectures of life that just got preserved in that sediment.
Exactly. But then you start to climb.
Up the cliff face.
Up the cliff face, yeah. You move to the higher rock layers, and the biological landscape shifts dramatically. You start finding increasingly varied, complex body structure.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, it's wild. Suddenly, heavily armored fishes appear in one band of rock, and then you climb a bit higher and you uncover the sprawling limbs of early land animals.
It's like watching a movie in slow motion.
Right. But here's the crazy part. Some of these organisms suddenly appear in the rock. They stick around through a few thick layers, which represents millions of years, by the way. And then just as suddenly, they completely vanish.
It's gone.
Completely gone. You never see them in any of the subsequent layers above them. So the question you have to ask yourself, standing on this cliff, is what exactly is the story recorded in this stone?
Really navigating that specific mystery is our mission for today's deep dive. Welcome to Messages in Stone, Reading the Fossil Record.
A perfect title.
I think so. Because, the intellectual work of studying the deep past, it isn't about memorizing a timeline of geological era names.
Oh, please no. No flashcards today.
Right, no flashcards. You don't need to quiz yourself on exactly what year a specific species lived. The real work, the way you interpret evidence like an actual working scientist, is about identifying patterns.
Looking for the clues.
Exactly. We are looking at where fossils appear within rock strata, how the diversity of organisms expands or contracts over millions of years.
Like tracking the rise and fall of whole ecosystems.
Yeah. And we want to see what structural changes reveal about the shifting environment over deep time.
Because looking at the Earth's crust is honestly like reading this massive, fragmented historical ledger.
A very messy ledger.
So messy. But the baseline logic we use to read it is actually pretty simple. It's called the law of superposition.
Which Nicholas Steno laid out way back in the 17th century, right?
Yep, the 1600s. And it just says that in undisturbed sedimentary rock, the deeper layers are older than the layers sitting above them.
Which makes sense logically.
Right, because silt and sand, they slowly settle out of water over time. They bury whatever's on the bottom, and then new sediment settles on top of that.
It's basically the laundry basket principle.
Oh, I love the laundry basket analogy. Explain that one.
Well, think about your laundry basket at home. The clothes at the very bottom.
The gym socks from Monday.
Right, the terrifying gym socks. Those were tossed in earlier in the week. They are older, chronologically speaking, than the T-shirt you just threw on top on Friday.
So reading the cliff face from bottom to top is just reading the laundry basket. Simple forms at the bottom, newer, complex forms at the top.
Right. And James Hutton expanded on this in the 18th century. He looked at the agonizingly slow rate of sedimentation, and he proposed this concept of deep time.
Deep time. Just the phrase gives me chills.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
He realized that for these vast, mile-high layers of rock to form, it required stretches of history that are basically unimaginable to the human brain.
He said there was no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end.
Which is such a poetic way for a scientist to describe rocks.
It really is. But, okay, I'm going to push back here.
Go for it.
The laundry basket analogy is great, but what happens when somebody kicks the laundry basket down the stairs?
Ah, the jumbled laundry problem.
Right, because the Earth destroys its own records, doesn't it? We've got glaciers literally scraping away 10 million years of rock like a bulldozer.
Or tectonic plates smashing into each other.
Exactly, folding layers entirely upside down.
Yeah.
Or periods where it was just too dry for any sediment to be deposited at all.
Oh, yeah, we call those unconformities. Missing chapters.
So if there are missing chapters, we can't just count layers from the bottom up and say, ah, yes, this fossil is exactly this old. Superposition just gives us a relative sequence. It's an order of events, but it doesn't give us the actual date.
Which is exactly why paleontologists rely heavily on radioactive dating. It acts as this forensic cross-check.
Okay, break that down without turning this into an intense chemistry lecture, if you can.
I promise, no heavy math. So when igneous rock-like volcanic ash cools and solidifies near these sedimentary fossil layers, it basically acts as a sealed chemical system.
Okay, a sealed system.
Yeah, it locks in specific radioactive isotopes. So take zircon crystals, for example. When a zircon crystal forms in coolant magma, its crystal structure readily accepts atoms of uranium, but it completely rejects lead.
Oh, wait, so meaning that when the crystal first forms, there is absolutely zero lead inside it.
Exactly, zero lead. The clock is essentially set to zero the moment it cools.
That's incredibly convenient.
Right. And over time, the radioactive uranium trapped inside spontaneously decays into lead. And it does this at a very predictable, constant rate.
So because we know it started with no lead?
Any lead we find inside it today must be the result of that uranium decaying.
Oh, wow. So by measuring the ratio of uranium to lead, you can calculate an absolute age for that volcanic rock layer.
Precisely. It gives us absolute chronological anchors. We get the specific dates of the volcanic ash beds, and then superposition lets us order the sedimentary fossil layers that are sandwiched between those ash beds.
So we use both to build a timeline.
Exactly.
But, I mean, the timeline is really only as good as the evidence left behind, right? And taphonomy, which is the process of fossilization, is brutally unforgiving.
Oh, it is the worst. We are looking at a heavily, heavily biased sample of biological history.
Because, realistically, the fossil record is an incredibly incomplete scrapbook.
Missing most of the photos. 99% of all organisms that have ever existed on Earth are now extinct.
99%.
And the vast majority of them left absolutely no trace whatsoever.
Because when something dies out in nature, it doesn't just sit there waiting to become a fossil.
Yeah.
Scavengers, bacteria, the weather, they dismantle it within weeks.
To actually become a fossil, this highly improbable sequence of events has to happen. It's a freak accident.
What actually has to happen?
Well, the creature usually needs to be buried almost instantly, and in an anoxic environment.
Meaning no oxygen, like mud or silt.
Right, because no oxygen halts decomposition. Then, over millennia, mineral-rich groundwater has to slowly percolate through the sediment, and it replaces the original organic material, molecule by molecule, with rock.
So if it takes a freak biological accident to make a fossil, we're basically mostly seeing creatures that happen to live near floodplains or lakes or shallow seas.
Exactly. A forest-dwelling bird is far less likely to be fossilized than a marine clam.
So, okay, if the record is this incomplete, if we only have these scattered, biased pages of a book with entire chapters ripped out, how do we trust it? Like, how do you distinguish a true global extinction event from just, a localized failure to fossilize?
That is the million-dollar question, and it would be impossible if we were only looking at one cliff face.
But we aren't.
Right. The power of the fossil record comes from overlapping global patterns. We call it stratigraphic correlation.
Okay, so matching up the layers from different places.
Exactly. If you observe, say, thousands of diverse marine species thriving in a specific chemical layer in the rocks of modern-day Europe.
Okay.
And then you go find that exact same chemical rock layer in China and in the Americas. And in all those locations, those thousands of species suddenly vanish from the sediment right above it.
Then it's not just a localized fluke.
Exactly. You don't need a perfectly complete fossil record to deduce that a catastrophic worldwide environmental shift occurred. The sudden absence of biological diversity synchronized all across the globe. That is the data.
The absence is the data. That's fascinating. But that raises another question. How do we classify these vanished creatures when we do finally find their bones?
Now, that takes us back to the late 18th century with a French anatomist named Georges Cuvier.
Ah, yes. Cuvier and the Ohio animal.
Yes. So people were finding these massive fossilized teeth and bones in the Ohio River Valley, and everyone just assumed, oh, it's just an elephant that wandered into North America.
Right. They just called it the Ohio animal. But Cuvier took a much more rigorous approach using comparative anatomy, didn't he?
He did. He looked at the specific mechanics of the teeth. So if you look at the molars of a modern African or Asian elephant, they have these relatively flat, ridged surfaces.
Like a washboard.
Yeah, perfectly adapted for grinding abrasive grasses. But the fossilized teeth from Ohio were entirely different. They featured these massive conical cusps.
Like sharp hills and valleys on the tooth.
Right. And Cuvier actually named the creature the mastodon, which literally translates to nipple tooth.
which is very descriptive.
Very French, very descriptive. Based on those conical knobs, he deduced that those teeth were structurally designed for crushing twigs and woody vegetation, not grinding flat grass.
So he proved mathematically and structurally that the mastodon was fundamentally distinct from any living elephant.
Yes, it was a unique biological design. And because the globe had been pretty extensively mapped by 1796, and there were no giant twig-crushing elephant analogs roaming the forests of North America.
Or anywhere else, for that matter.
Exactly. So Cuvier established this groundbreaking concept, biological extinction. He proved that species could be entirely erased from the Earth.
And see, this realization about vanished species often triggers a massive misconception. And I want to make sure we talk about this because it's so common.
The latter.
The latter. When we talk about ancient species and how they relate to modern animals, there's a huge tendency to picture evolution as a ladder. You know the image, right?
Oh, the classic march of progress.
Yeah. People imagine a fish dragging itself out of the water, turning into a lizard, the lizard morphing into a monkey, and the monkey standing up to become a human at the very top of the ladder. As if life is marching towards some more advanced pinnacle.
We need to discard the latter concept entirely. It's just wrong. Evolution operates as a branching tree.
A branching tree.
Yeah, there is no biological momentum toward a better or perfect organism. Every living thing is simply adapted to its specific current environment, period.
So a modern cockroach is just as evolved and successful as a modern human.
Exactly. There is no single missing link halfway between a fish and a mammal. Instead, populations splinter. They migrate into different environments, they face different survival pressures, and over millions of years, they branch off into distinct species.
And they share underlying body structures not because one directly morphed into the other, but because they inherited their architectural blueprint from a common ancestor population.
Precisely. And to see how these inherited structures show up in the geological record, we have to look at this amazing geological anomaly in southeast Alaska.
Oh, Gravina Island.
Gravina Island. So today, the island is subarctic. It is defined by cold rain, freezing winters, dense hemlock forests.
Not a place for a swim.
Definitely not. Yet when scientists excavate the black marine shales on that island, they find fossils that are 210 million years old, belonging to ichthyosaurs.
Marine reptiles. Giant marine reptiles.
Species like Shawnosaurus and Tortotectnemus. These were apex predators. Giant ocean-swimming animals perfectly adapted to a marine environment.
Finding them entombed in a cold Alaskan forest seems totally contradictory.
Until you read the magnetic signatures in the rock.
Right, because if we just assume the entire globe was tropically warm 200 million years ago, that wouldn't actually explain the specific geology of these Alaskan rocks.
No, the mechanism that explains this is paleomagnetism.
Paleomagnetism. Okay, how does that work?
So when certain iron-rich rocks form, the iron minerals inside them act like tiny little compass needles. They physically align themselves with the Earth's magnetic field before the rock hardens.
Oh, wow. So they freeze in place.
Exactly. And the angle of that alignment locks in the exact latitude where the rock was created.
That's incredible.
So the magnetic signature of the Gravina Island shale proves that 210 million years ago, that specific landmass was located way down near the equator.
It was a tropical marine ecosystem.
Yes. And over millions of years, plate tectonics slowly transported that rock, and the tropical sea monsters fossilized inside it thousands of miles north to the subarctic.
So the Earth literally physically moved the crime scene.
Exactly. But beyond the geological movement, the ichthyosaurs themselves offer a stunning piece of evidence for that branching tree of comparative anatomy we were talking about.
Right, because these animals were built for the ocean. They had flippers for navigating the water. But if you analyze the skeletal structure inside those flippers,
You find the exact same one bone, two bones, many bones layout that exists in the human arm.
that blows my mind every time. One upper arm bone, two forearm bones, and a cluster of distinct wrist and digit bones encased inside the flipper.
Yep. And keep in mind, a shark does not have finger bones inside its fin.
A shark's fin is just supported by cartilage rods, right?
Exactly. Because sharks evolved from a completely different, much older aquatic lineage.
But the marine reptile has that specific one bone, two bones layout.
Because it inherited it from a land-dwelling four-legged common ancestor that had arms and legs. Over time, as the specific branch of reptiles returned to the ocean, natural selection didn't just invent a new swimming structure from scratch.
It just modified the existing limb.
Yeah, shortening and flattening the arm bones and encasing the digits in soft tissue to create a paddle.
It's a homologous structure. The underlying architectural blueprint stays intact, which proves common ancestry, even though the modern function, swimming through water versus, manipulating tools, is entirely different.
The environment dictates the shape of the blueprint over time. When an environment is mostly stable, the body structures remain incredibly stable across the rock layers.
But when the environment exerts extreme pressure, life is forced through a biological filter.
And we see one of the most intense examples of this environmental filter on the north slope of Alaska.
In the Prince Creek Formation, right?
Yes. So 70 million years ago, this landmass was already situated at a paleolatitude of about 80 degrees north.
So deep within the ancient Arctic Circle.
Very deep. And while the global climate was significantly warmer back during the Cretaceous period, the axial tilt of the Earth meant this region still experienced a brutal, unchangeable reality.
120 days of continuous winter darkness.
4 solid months, where the sun never breaches the horizon.
Freezing temperatures and, crucially, a complete halt to photosynthesis.
Which is a huge problem.
Yeah. If the plant food web collapses for a third of the year, the primary consumers, the plant eaters, have a massive problem. So the logical assumption is migration, right?
That's what people thought.
Like, if you are a massive herbivorous dinosaur, you eat the summer vegetation, and before the darkness sets in, you just walk hundreds of miles south to warmer latitudes.
And migration was the dominant scientific consensus for a really long time. I mean, it seemed biologically impossible for a dinosaur to survive an Arctic winter.
But the rocks of the Prince Creek Formation rewrote that consensus.
Completely. Paleontologists didn't just find adult bones there. They uncovered dense bone beds containing the remains of perinatal dinosaurs.
Perinatal meaning they had either just hatched or were still developing inside the egg.
Exactly. A newborn dinosaur cannot undertake a 1,000-mile migration ahead of the winter.
Obviously not.
Furthermore, researchers analyzed the bone histology, the microscopic internal structure of the adult fossils, and they found specific growth rings.
Like tree rings.
Exactly like tree rings. Bones record periods of rapid growth and periods of arrested growth. The bone data indicates these animals were active year-round.
So they were nesting, reproducing, and surviving the 4 months of freezing darkness right there on site.
Which thoroughly dismantles the old assumption of dinosaurs as these sluggish, cold-blooded reptiles that depended on the sun to warm their bodies.
To survive that environment, they had to be warm-blooded, or at least possess some highly complex metabolic adaptations to generate their own internal body heat.
And the environmental filter is also defined by its negative space.
Oh, meaning what we don't find in the rock.
Right. In the exact same Prince Creek deposits where we find these highly adapted dinosaurs, we find absolutely zero fossils of ectothermic animals.
No crocodiles, no turtles, no snakes.
None. Because an animal that relies entirely on external temperatures to regulate its metabolism simply cannot survive 120 days of freezing darkness. The environment aggressively filtered them out of that ecosystem.
So the rock layers capture the physiological limitations of those vanished species. It really is a brilliant deduction made possible by modern paleontology, radiometric dating, and this microscopic histological analysis.
It is, but, analyzing the landscape and deducing the hidden biology of the past, it isn't actually a modern invention.
What do you mean?
Well, long before European scientists were naming the mastodon, indigenous peoples were employing rigorous logical frameworks to explain the fossil record.
Oh, this is the mammoth story.
Yes. So in the deep permafrost zones of eastern Siberia and Alaska, the indigenous Saka and Evenki peoples frequently encountered the remains of woolly mammoths.
But these weren't just petrified bones scattered in the dirt.
No, because they were entombed in freezing earth, these massive animals were often perfectly preserved, complete with skin, muscle tissue, hair, and these massive spiraling tusks.
Just wrap your head around that. Finding a giant, hairy, elephant-like creature frozen perfectly intact in the ground, that is an incredible piece of raw data to stumble across.
It really is. And the way they processed this evidence was entirely rooted in observable morphology and the depositional environment.
So they looked at where it was buried and what its body looked like.
Exactly. They observed that these colossal creatures were only ever found deep underground or sometimes eroding out of riverbanks.
Okay.
They examined the massive curving tusks and noted their structural resemblance to giant digging tools or plows.
Oh, I see where this is going.
And furthermore, the local geography featured these deep, newly carved ravines and shifting earth. So they integrated all of that into their analysis.
So, based entirely on the observable evidence in their local environment, they formulated this highly coherent hypothesis. They deduced that mammoths were giant subterranean animals that lived their entire lives burrowing through the dark earth.
Right. The tusks were functional adaptations for carving out underground tunnels,
Yep.
tunnels which eventually collapsed to form the river valleys.
That makes so much sense given the evidence they had. And crucially, because the mammoths were only ever found dead when they were exposed by melting ice or landslides.
They logically concluded that sunlight or exposure to the surface air was fatal to the creatures.
It is just a perfectly sophisticated, localized application of comparative anatomy and environmental analysis.
It's amazing. They look at the structures, the digging tusks, and assigned a biological function that perfectly fit the context of finding them buried in the dark earth.
It really demonstrates that the human drive to look at the scattered remnants of the Earth's history, to try and reconstruct the narrative, has just always been there.
Always.
So, if there is a core concept to take away from this entire exploration today, it is that the intellectual work of studying the deep past is about reading the patterns.
Yes. It's observing where simple architectures give way to sprawling complexity in the cliff face.
It's tracking the structural blueprint of an arm bone as it adapts into a marine flipper over millions of years.
And it is recognizing the profound silence in the rock when an environment shifts too rapidly, and entire lineages of life, thousands of diverse species, simply vanish from the overlapping global strata, leaving only a boundary of clay and ash.
Because we started this deep dive by standing at the base of that massive rock face, chipping away at the bottom layers, the fossil record is a fragmented ledger read from the bottom up. 99% of the biological actors have left the stage, leaving behind only the most durable parts of themselves.
A tooth, a perinatal bone, or a footprint.
Exactly. Every piece of rock is a compressed, silent witness to environments we can barely comprehend.
Which really leaves us with a critical question to consider.
All right, lay it on us.
Well, you have seen how scientists and ancient observers piece together the scattered clues of deep time, anatomical blueprints, and extreme environmental filters. Science relies on evaluating the evidence and tracing the logical mechanisms for yourself. So, considering everything we've analyzed today, from the tropical marine reptiles entombed in cold Alaskan forests, to the isotopic clocks ticking inside volcanic crystals, what patterns would convince you that life on Earth has changed over time?